Hello, my name is Dr. Stanley Lang. Welcome to this broadcast, and the topic today is PTSD and chronic stress. And this was the topic yesterday, but I decided to go a little bit more deeply into the topic because I felt like I had skimmed the surface too much yesterday. And as I thought about it more, I wanted to give a little bit more helpful information for somebody that was just wanting to know, what can I do right now to start to decrease stress? Now, I put the PTSD in because that is obviously sort of like the peak of stress-related conditions. It has a formal diagnosis. I'm not going to get into. People that know they have PTSD, of course, know a lot more about it. There's some people with a lot of stress who actually would qualify for the diagnosis and don't even know it. They just have so much stress in their life from usually some pretty bad past events, and they've got some toxic memories that are focused, that their subconscious focuses on. And the question is, how can we overcome these kind of stressful experiences that are going on inside of us? And of course, anything that's helpful for something that's as extreme as PTSD is going to be helpful for more moderate or even mild forms of stress. So this is applicable to pretty much everybody. But I wanted to give some immediate things that you could do right now, in addition to some longer-term strategies for you to at least consider. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. And so it's like, as I said, the extreme end of the spectrum of what we would call chronic stress disorder. And stress, I'm not going to formally diagnose it as much as give you a way to think about it. Stress is when where I'm at is a long ways away from where I want to be, and how that feels in between creates this sensation of stress. Now, when the distance is short, that actually motivates us to do things. But when the distance is this wide place between where I'm at and where I want to be, doesn't matter what it is, then I experience that as chronic stress. And if it's way out here, it's PTSD. So how do we narrow the gap? How do we bring it close together? What we would call, some people would call, the reality expectation gap. Well, I believe that the solution lies in whole person health, a whole person health approach. And so I'm going to give some ideas in each one of these areas. And some of these are actionable right at the very, today. Some of these you're probably aware of, and some of them might be completely new to you. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the physical realm. The physical realm. And there are several things that we could talk about, but I'm going to focus on three. And so again, we're looking at the whole person health model. That's health of body, mind, and spirit. All three contribute to who you are. And now on the physical realm, the body, I've got biome first. So what's the biome? Well, the biome is the community of bacteria and fungi and viruses that live in your GI tract. Now, there's also a biome on your skin, in your nasal passages, but the GI tract biome seems to modulate a lot of things that have to do with stress. Now, how does that happen? Well, it's very complicated, so I'm not going to try to throw a lot of fancy science at you, but just to say that the way that God has made us is that this biome, this community of bacteria, trillions of bacteria, over 1,500 species of bacteria, over 5,000 species of fungi that live in our GI tract, are designed to be in a precise balance. Now, that balance may shift back and forth depending on the needs, but when that balance gets severely distorted, then these bacteria don't communicate well with each other, or they communicate something's wrong to the GI tract itself. And that GI tract, your bowel, is talking to the brain. And when the brain and the bowel communicate back and forth and things are not right in the bowel, then that starts to disturb the signal, and the brain starts to interpret something as not right. Now, whenever the brain interprets something as not right, it becomes sort of hypervigilant about studying that part of the body, and it kind of shifts into stress mode. Now, when the biome is exposed to lots of different chemicals that we have in our environment, especially glyphosate, it seriously distorts the ratio of these different bacteria, because glyphosate is a very potent killer of bacteria. It actually was first marketed as an antibiotic. Now it's used as an herbicide. So it's sprayed on most of the grains in the United States. Almost all the soy is sprayed on. Most of the corn it's sprayed on. Most of the wheat it's sprayed on at the end of the growing season, even though wheat is not a GMO crop. And it's sprayed on most of the oats. So why would it be sprayed on oats and wheat? Because it helps to desiccate these things, these foods, so they're easier to harvest. And so farmers have been taught that glyphosate is safe to use, so they use it. But unfortunately, it's not safe. It's highly toxic to our biome. And so it damages lots of the bacteria, it messes up the species ratio, and it interferes the communication network between the bacteria. And finally, this chemical does damage the lining of the bowel and makes that somewhat leaky. So when that biome gut system is not working right, then the body says, okay, we are now in chronic stress. The brain says that because now, instead of hearing a signal coming back from the gut that is coherent, it's just hearing a lot of noise. It doesn't even make sense to the brain. So the brain knows something's wrong. And at that point, the brain starts to signal to the rest of the body, you're now in stress mode. And even if you don't feel stressed, your muscles are now getting a signal from the brain that says you're in stress mode, and it actually will start to push you into insulin resistance. So even without eating the wrong foods that are the high glycemic foods, you can be pushed into insulin resistance. So the biome is critical to get right. And that means avoiding toxins by eating foods that are clean. That means avoiding GMOs, avoiding glyphosate as much as possible, which means eating organic as much as possible. And it means consuming probiotic foods on a regular basis. Those include organic apple cider vinegar, kefir, organic yogurt, homemade sauerkraut or other fermented vegetables, and kombucha. So these things provide probiotic bacteria, which will help to repair your biome if you are not indulging in junky food that has all of these chemicals. So if you want the gut to fix itself, you have to stop pouring chemicals in that are damaging it. So that's the first thing on the physical part of this whole person health approach. Now, the second thing I mentioned is low glycemic. What does that mean? Low glycemic means that we're eating in a way that the blood sugar doesn't go up rapidly after a meal. So we're referring to carbohydrates. Now, I'm not saying low carb, I'm saying low glycemic. So carbs are broken down into sugar in the body. That's what a definition of a carb is. It's a chain of sugar molecules that are broken down into sugar in the body. Now, they're broken down either slowly, and that means that they're low glycemic, or they're broken down quickly, and that means they're high glycemic. High glycemic carbs cause stress. And so the American diet is made up of lots and lots and lots of high glycemic carbs. Grains, potatoes, rice, sugar. Now, those foods are not evil in and of themselves, but when you eat a whole bunch of them all the time, they totally distort the way that God designed the system to work. So when the blood sugar rises rapidly, the body says, oh, this is a challenge now, so it has to pump out a bunch of insulin to head off the pass so that the blood sugar will come back down. But not only that, there's an echo in the brain. So the neurotransmitters are being echoed by the blood sugars because the brain sugar echoes the blood sugar. So as the brain sugars bounce up and down, so do neurotransmitter levels, and that causes a stress response inside your noggin. It also affects the production of serotonin, which is one of the major neurotransmitters, mostly which is made in the gut. That gets back to the first part, which is the biome stuff. And if you want your gut to make the serotonin it's supposed to be making, then you got to eat right. If you want to have stable brain sugar, you've got to eat low glycemic. Now, there's two variations of low glycemic. One, you can see it says the modified plate. Now, that's a low glycemic diet that I have been using for more than 25 years, and it works very, very well to reverse diabetes. I've had lots and lots of patients who have completely reversed their diabetes following the modified plate. It involves eating low. It's still mainly carbs, so it's not a low carb diet. It's a low glycemic diet, but it does have a lot of healthy protein and fat in it also. The second option is the ketogenic diet. Now, the ketogenic diet is the ultimate in low glycemic because it has such a small amount of carbs in it. It is a truly low carb diet, and the ketogenic diet is about 70% fat, about 25% protein, and the rest a little bit as carbs with maybe a handful of berries thrown in for measure. And the ketogenic diet is even more powerful in terms of healing the brain in people who have stress, especially people with PTSD. So if you have PTSD and you want to start on a journey as quickly as possible to getting well, start eating a healthy ketogenic diet. There's a lot of unhealthy versions. There are some healthy versions. I encourage you to follow and find a healthy version of the ketogenic diet because they're not all created equally. The third thing I mentioned is exercise. So exercise is critical if you want good physical health. If you want stress reduction, if you want a whole person health stress reduction approach, the body part here, you have to exercise. There's just no way out. You're not going to be well if you don't exercise regularly, but it doesn't have to be complicated. A 30-minute vigorous walk every day is sufficient. Now, there's some other things that will accomplish a lot more than a vigorous walk, but a 30-minute vigorous walk every day is sufficient. So almost everybody can walk. And everybody's got 30 minutes a day to go take a walk if you can walk. And if you can't walk, then there are definitely some alternative exercises that you can do. You can use an exercise bike if you've got knee problems, or you can get in the water at some pool and walk in the water. So you've got to spend 30 minutes a day in some sort of exercise if your goal is stress reduction. If you want to address PTSD, if you want to address chronic stress that's short of the diagnosis of PTSD, if you just want to address the anxiety and feeling stressed out all the time and feeling nervous, you got to exercise. It's critical. You're leaving a lot of money on the table if you don't exercise on a daily basis. It's not a negotiable, do it if I can. It's something that you make as a high priority, or you're not going to be nearly as well as you could be. And it doesn't have to be fancy, like I said. Now, the second part is emotional of this triangle. The mind part, we'll say mind or emotions. So the things that I wrote here are relationships and toxic memories. Relationships and toxic memories. Now, relationships could be divided into basically two groups, family and friends. So when you are trying to use your valuable relationships in a way that helps you be healthy, you have to be giving. That's the whole point. I sort of misspoke by saying by saying it as I did, which implied that I'm using the relationship to try to get better. That alone sort of betrays the wrong way of thinking about it. The question is, how can I be in this relationship that is healthy for me also? And the way that we're being in relationships that are healthy for us is that we're giving into them. So my recommendation is that you are always, every day, giving into a family relationship in some way. You're making somebody in your family a better person because you gave into that relationship expecting nothing in return. It doesn't take a lot. 5 minutes is all you need to do to be giving something in that you're not expecting something back. It's better if it's face-to-face, person-to-person, but if that's not possible, make it long-distance phone call. I don't recommend email as a good option. You need to hear each other's voice as the ideal. And or writing letters is okay too, but email is not. An electronic only connection doesn't bring this sense of having reached out and touched another person and given them something. And so I recommend some family member that you touch every day for at least 5 minutes. You're doing something positive for them beyond just cruise control. You're investing in that relationship. You're giving something back in. The second major relationship groups are our friends. Now, my recommendation is to do the same thing with one of your friends once a week. So that's not a huge commitment, but if you do it once a week where you pick a friend and you just invest in that relationship, expecting nothing back, magic happens. God designed it that way. When we give into relationships, friends and family, then blessings come back our way. And I'm not going to explain all of the why I think that happens. Books have been written on the subject. I'm just reminding you the things that you can do right now that can make you feel better right now. Now, the thing that I wrote at the bottom here, EFT, stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. Now, Emotional Freedom Technique was developed in the 1980s and refined in the 1990s. It currently is known as tapping by lots of people. And when it was first developed, it was a very precise way of dealing with toxic memories, and it works very well. The problem is that since it has first been developed, there have been so many different permutations of this technique that some of them have gotten into what I consider dangerous spiritual territory. So I developed a Christian version of EFT many years ago, and I use this for my patients that have severe stress. And I've used it with patients with PTSD, and it is remarkable how it can heal very toxic memories very quickly. So the EFT is very powerful. The Christian EFT is like EFT on steroids, because what happens with EFT is that you disable the toxic memories energy. And when you do it with a Christian context, you insert an experience with Jesus at the same time. So you take away the toxic and you insert this experience with Jesus, and it's very powerful, very healing. And so I encourage this as a very powerful way to deal with this whole idea of emotional or mind part of stress. So the third area is spiritual, and that's the things I'll just touch on that you can do right now is make a list of people that you're angry at, that you have resentment towards, and just make a list of them, and then purpose to forgive them. Just decide you're going to forgive them. Well, what does forgiveness mean? Well, I'm not going to go into complex theology here, but just to say that we hold people kind of in our mind as deserving of punishment for something they did to us. And we're mad at them, and we think that they should be punished, and we kind of want to see them get punished. And forgiveness means I let go of that. I let go of any right of punishment. I give it into God's hands. I give it into God's hands. And that's what forgiveness is all about. I let go of the right of me to make sure this person gets punished. And I just let go. And at the same time, I'm thankful for all of the different blessings in my life. Now, you may feel your life is so rotten, there's nothing thankful about it, to be thankful about. The fact that you have life is a very powerful sign of God's love for you, no matter how rotten your life has been, because this life is the ticket to eternity. So if you weren't created, you weren't going to spend eternity anywhere. You're non-existent. But because you have been given life, you have a chance to spend eternity with God. You've got a chance to spend eternity with Satan. You get to take your pick. You get to go where you want to go, but you get the chance to spend eternity with God, and God wants to make sure that that happens by healing you if you want to be healed. So being thankful puts you in the right frame of mind. Now, the third thing that I have written there is called the Jesus Prayer. The Jesus Prayer is the most ancient Christian prayer. It's a way of contemplative or meditative prayer that just involves gently repeating the name of Jesus purposely with affection in your mind. It's not a mantra. It's not an Eastern form of meditation. It's not a substitute for TM. It's totally opposite to TM. It's a way of focusing on Jesus by repeating his name, because we are so distractible. And so there are a lot of different resources on how to learn the Jesus prayer. I have some that I'd like to give you if you would like to receive them, if you stay to the end of the video. The last thing that I mentioned here is Christian Chi Gong. Now, that was the topic of the shorter video yesterday. And this is why I decided I needed to enlarge on this, because I felt like I gave that little bit of information out of context. The context is all this other stuff that I've just said to you, because Christian Chi Gong should be part of a whole person health approach, health of body, mind, and spirit. All of these things are really critical. So Chi Gong is an ancient Chinese form of healing movement that has served the Chinese community for thousands of years. But it grew up in a Buddhist worldview. And for many people that practice Qigong and teach Qigong, they teach it from a Buddhist context, even when they're trying not to. And they tend to describe it in ways that are foreign to a Christian worldview. Now, why is that important? Well, it might not be important at all to you, but to people who it is important to, I want you to understand the difference between Christian Qigong and regular Qigong, because in Christian Qigong, you're not focusing on any energy at all, except for the love of God. That's the only energy that you're focusing on and receiving and experiencing. Now, you do that for 30 minutes. You experience the love of God, and you feel the love of God in different ways as you practice various movements that through antiquity have brought healing to the body, because that's the way God designed us. So how does that happen? There's not enough science to know for sure, but I believe personally that Qigong exercises activate the fascial planes. Fascia is the lining of the surface of our muscles and of our organs. All the fascia is connected in the body. I think that's how it happens, but nobody really knows for sure as far as how the Qigong movements are healing to the body. But what also happens is this experience of the love of God at the same time, and that is really, really healing. Now, that's the context of why I think Christian Qigong is such a powerful tool for people with chronic stress and PTSD, because Qigong has been studied enough to know that it does decrease the stress response. It does balance the body just by doing Qigong movements. And I just think that when you do it with the Christian meditations, it's a much more powerful encounter with God and experiencing God's love for you, which to me is healing. And to the people who I have personally taught this to, it's very healing. So I think it will be healing to you if you are kind of inclined in that direction. Now, my recommendation is that if you're kind of inclined in that direction, that you take advantage of the 7-day free trial that you can have access to with the link either on this video or below this video, and just try it out. You can access the Qigong videos right away. They're not at the top of the program because it's a whole program devoted to whole person health, stress reduction. But Qigong is part of it. It's offered as part of it. And so I encourage you to take advantage of all of these different things that I've talked about today. Some of them you can do right now. You will feel better tomorrow if you start doing some of them today, both in not only in the physical, but in the emotional and in the spiritual. You can do some of those things today and you'll feel better tomorrow. But if you continue to do all of them, you're much more likely to feel a whole lot better down the road. I've seen this work in the lives of patients for many years now. I know it works, and I've seen it happen in my own life. And largely, this program was a strategy for me to bring healing to my own self. As I have dealt with stress through the years, being a doctor, taking care of lots of sick people, all of the different tragedies around me, that's stressful. And I became a student of how do you heal stress. And these tools that I'm talking to you about are all very critical parts of how I heal my own stress. And if I didn't have them, I would be all stressed out. but generally I'm pretty peaceful. And I think it's because I do all these things. And I encourage you to do as many of them that you can, because they are all good. And if you do them together, that integrated approach is what we call a whole person health approach, a whole person health approach. So I do encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity to use the program for free for 7 days, because there's no downside to you for doing it. And take from it what you can. And if there's a lot of stuff in there, so you're not going to get through it all in 7 days, but you'll at least know whether it's something that you want to do for the long run and be a monthly member, which is like 30 some bucks a month. So it's not very much anyway. So I hope this has been helpful to you, that you can take something home and start to do some of these things in every one of these 3 areas, body, mind, and spirit. And so that you can start to experience more and more healing of the stress in your life, the way that I know that God wants us to experience it, because he made us this way, with all of these different resources, these different ways that we can receive healing, body, mind, and spirit. So I wish you well, God bless, and have a great day.